Hi, I'm Tonya. 15 years ago, my mother stood at a dinner table and told everyone I was dead to her. No warning, no goodbye. Now she's back, just days after my aunt left me her entire estate. She says she wants peace, but she showed up with lawyers, old paperwork, and a press kit calling herself the grieving mother. How do you forgive someone who didn't just leave you, but tried to rewrite your entire existence? And what do you do when they smile, pretending it's love, but everything they want is tied to what you've survived? Is this reunion or the final betrayal? The silence in the house had weight to it. Not the peaceful kind, not the comforting hush you'd feel after a good day, tucked in with warm tea and soft lamplight. No, this was the type that made your bones aware of every creak in the wood, every tick of the old clock that had belonged to Aunt Marisol. I stood in the middle of the living room. No, the parlor, as she insisted we call it, with one hand still on the mantel. Her urn sat on the shelf above the fireplace, small and quiet like she had been in her last days. "Don't let them back in, no matter what face they wear," she had whispered the night before she passed. Her fingers had gripped mine harder than I thought possible for someone in her condition. I remembered that grip as I stared into the empty space she used to occupy, every cushion on her reading couch still holding her shape in memory. And then the doorbell rang. I froze. No one rang that bell, not even delivery drivers, not even the lawyer. This estate had its own rhythm, and visitors were by appointment only. "I wasn't expecting company," I muttered aloud to no one, my voice slicing through the stillness. I walked toward the front door slowly, carefully, not out of fear, but because I knew. I just knew. There was no reason for someone to show up unannounced unless they wanted something. I opened the door, and there she was. Letty, my mother. Smiling like she hadn't shattered my life into 1,000 pieces. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, the kind of voice you'd use with a child you were trying to win back after forgetting their birthday. Her perfume hit me first, something expensive, overly floral, masking whatever she didn't want to smell like. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My face told her she wasn't welcome, but that never mattered to Letty. "Can I come in?" she asked, already stepping across the threshold. I let her. Because part of being prepared is knowing when to let the storm walk into your house so you can study it up close. The last time we were in the same room, she raised a glass at a family dinner and toasted to my absence. "She is no longer my daughter," she said to the whole table, not even looking at me. "As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me." Nobody defended me. No gasps. No one left the table. I remember pushing my chair back, the sound louder than I meant it to be, and stepping out into the rain that had just started falling. I stood under the edge of the porch, crying silently, not because of the words, but because I had no one to cry to. Not one person followed me. Exile in our family wasn't a place. It was a decision, a verdict, a cancellation. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I did. But now, here she was, back like it was some kind of reunion special. She walked into the parlor like it was still hers. I stood behind her, arms crossed. "You look just like her," she said, her eyes scanning the mantel, stopping at Marisol's urn. "I always said you favored my side of the family more than your father's." She came rehearsed. That was obvious. Her tone was too measured, too perfectly modulated. Not an ounce of genuine warmth. It was all stagecraft. "You've kept the place. Charming," she added. "Feels good to be back." I said nothing. My silence wasn't weakness, it was leverage, and I intended to spend it wisely. "I'd like to attend the will reading tomorrow," she continued, smoothing the hem of her tailored coat. "After all, I am still family." I didn't nod. I didn't blink. I let the silence remind her of what she had forfeited. As she made herself comfortable, yes, comfortable, I watched her closely. She was too alert, too observant. Her eyes darted from the framed photo on the piano to the stack of mail on the console table. She wasn't reminiscing. She was inventorying. Well, I remembered the last time she touched this house. It was a shouting match with Marisol over stealing me away, though she had been the one to leave me in the first place. That night ended with Marisol slamming the door in her face, locking it, and pouring herself a bourbon she didn't even finish. There's no forgiveness in her eyes, only calculation, I whispered internally. She wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to reclaim. She wasn't mourning, I told myself. She was scouting. Then came the moment I knew was inevitable. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded document, and placed it slowly, almost ceremoniously, on the coffee table. "Just a few things we should clear up before the reading tomorrow," she said with a soft smile, the kind that never touched her eyes. She slid the envelope toward me, smiled again, and added, "You'll want to read this before the lawyers do." The envelope hadn't moved since she left it on the table. For hours, it just sat there, daring me to touch it. I didn't. Not right away. I poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink, stood by the fireplace pretending to check the candles, then sat down across from it like it might start talking first. Eventually, curiosity won over irritation. I reached for it. Not fast, not slow, just steady, and flipped the flap. The paper inside was stiff, yellowed at the corners. It wasn't anything new. The ink had bled in places from age. My eyes stopped at the header: guardianship authorization, emergency medical directive, then my name, and hers, Letty's, 15 years ago. Dated just 2 weeks before she left me. Appointed guardian in case of medical or mental incapacity. Signed, notarized. It looked official. It was official. But it didn't belong here. Not now. Not in this moment. It was a ghost of paperwork from a mother who had renounced every part of that role long ago. "This should have been voided the day she vanished," I murmured. But here it was, staring back like a threat, dressed up in legalese. I flipped to the back, no amendments, no notes, just an old seal and a lawyer's name I vaguely recognized from my childhood. I sat back and let the weight of it settle in my chest. Could she actually use this? Could she argue I wasn't mentally fit and somehow delay Marisol's will? A ridiculous notion, except that with Letty, ridiculous had a habit of becoming real. She returned like she hadn't just dropped a grenade, carrying 2 cups of tea, Earl Grey probably, on Marisol's antique tray like she still had keys to this place. I didn't take the cup. I just watched her set them down. "What is this supposed to be?" I asked, nodding toward the envelope. My tone wasn't accusatory. It was too calm for that, more surgical than sharp. Letty sipped her tea first, then offered a smile lined with calculated warmth. "Just looking out for you. You've been through a lot. It's good to have support when life changes suddenly." "You haven't called me your daughter in 15 years, I said plainly. She didn't flinch. "And now I am," she answered, as if declaring it made it true again. "Because you need family more than ever." I nearly laughed. The gall of that sentence. The twisting of logic to position herself as the rescuer in a story she authored as the villain. She's using concern like a currency, I thought, and she thinks I'm bankrupt. We sat there for another few seconds, her sipping, me studying. Then she leaned in, elbows on her knees, and softened her voice. "Let's not make this messy." Messy. "You keep the house," she said smoothly. "It's a beautiful space. It should stay with you." I blinked. "And?" I asked. She reached into her purse again. Her bag seemed bottomless with props, and pulled out a piece of folded paper. This one was freshly printed. She unfolded it as she spoke. "Give me 20% of whatever Marisol left you. Just 20. That's more than fair, don't you think?" I stared. There it was, the mask slipping, mid-sentence. That's the real reason, I thought. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, a percentage. "I've fallen on hard times," she continued, tone casual, like she was explaining a delayed phone bill. "Your aunt and I, we had our differences, but I gave up so much. You wouldn't be who you are without me. We both know Marisol owed me." "Owed you?" I asked, more intrigued than angry. "You think raising a child alone was easy? You think handing her off came without cost?" She gestured like her hands carried invisible scars. "She got the glory. You became her little legacy. I got left with nothing." I leaned back, crossing my arms. So this is what my blackmail? Or just emotional extortion dressed in soft language? She smirked. Call it closure, sweetheart. The word sweetheart coming from her mouth made my skin tighten. I reached across the table, took the old guardianship document with both hands, and tore it clean down the middle. Then again, just to be sure, no flourish, no eye contact, just action. This house doesn't carry space for old threats, I said flatly. Or bad history. Her smile faltered, just a crack, but enough to show she wasn't expecting that move. You really think this is over, Tonya? She said, voice tight now. Less performance, more edge. I stood. It never even started, I said. You buried me 15 years ago. Now you want to dig me up because the land suddenly looks valuable. She rose slowly, adjusting her coat. You might want to be careful, she said, voice low but clear. The people who burn bridges don't always remember they'll need them again. I walked with her to the door, not out of politeness, but to make sure she didn't linger. She paused at the threshold, turning just enough to deliver one more line. We'll see what the lawyers say tomorrow. When the door closed behind her, the silence returned. I didn't sit. I didn't cry. I walked back to the parlor and looked down at the shredded paper on the coffee table. When a ghost walks into your home and demands rent, I thought, you start to question who the real owner of the past is. After Letty left, the silence came back, not the kind that comforts, but the kind that presses against your chest, reminding you how loud absence can be. I stayed in the library long after her perfume had vanished from the hallway, sitting in the same armchair where Marisol used to read financial journals aloud, just to fill the room. That night, it felt like even the walls were holding their breath. I was still holding the torn pieces of the guardianship document. I hadn't thrown them away, not yet. Across the room, the bookshelf that Marisol once kept locked had a faint glow from the wall sconce above it. It had always been there, but somehow it caught my attention now, like it was waiting. I stood up, walked over, and gently pulled on the small brass knob. It didn't open at first. The latch stuck, but after a little pressure, it gave. Inside was a photograph, bent at the corners, the color faded. It was me, 17. Sitting on the edge of a garden bench, my expression blank. Not sad, not smiling, just gone. I didn't remember the picture being taken, but I knew the look. It was the look of someone still pretending to be found. Some mothers give silence as a punishment, I whispered to no one. Mine gave it as a legacy. The room smelled faintly of Marisol's Chanel No. 5. Not enough to be recent, just enough to be memory. You start imagining reasons for why they're gone, I said aloud. So it hurts less when they stay gone. That was the year everything changed. It started with an empty apartment. No note on the fridge, no voicemail, just drawers half open, closets half empty, and the sound of the neighbor's TV bleeding through the wall. I'd been calling out for my mom for hours before it clicked. She wasn't coming back. Marisol showed up that night with a trunk and a list. She didn't cry. She didn't ask how I felt. She just said, "You'll be safe here now, safe." She never used the word abandoned. It was forbidden in this house. I didn't argue. At 17, I already knew some truths were too heavy for polite living rooms. There was a lawyer, Marisol's. He handed me a binder with my new school schedule and told me, without looking me in the eyes, this family doesn't air laundry, clean or dirty. I wasn't asked how I was doing. I wasn't asked what I needed. I was given instructions, a room, and a new toothbrush. No therapy, no grief counselor, no acknowledgement, just rules and silence. In families like ours, I journaled once, silence is not absence, it's a strategy. It worked too. I became the girl who didn't speak unless spoken to. I learned which forks went where, how to write thank you notes, and how to smile without showing teeth. I wore pressed blouses and said ma'am and sir, even when I wanted to scream. Years later, after I'd moved out and built a life that looked neat from the outside, I still struggled with answering one question. Where's your mom? At some point, I just started saying, it's complicated, and left it there. Tonight, though, something compelled me to go deeper. I returned to the cabinet. Behind a stack of neatly filed deeds and utility bills, I found a folder labeled in Marisol's careful handwriting. Shalia, confidential. The paper inside wasn't old, but it felt heavy. Letters, notes. A printout of an email chain between Marisol and a cousin from Ohio, a cousin I barely remembered. In the letter, the cousin warned Marisol. Letty mentioned she was looking at private facilities, said the girl's unpredictable, said she couldn't raise someone who didn't bend. My throat tightened. That was about me. That was her backup plan. Before Marisol. Before the trunk and the list. I was 17, I whispered. My only crime was not breaking in the way she expected. It all made sense now. The guardianship letter, the abrupt disappearance, the sudden switch to Marisol, becoming the mother I never asked for, but desperately needed. The silence was never for me. It wasn't protection. It was a cover. Marisol never told me any of this. She let me believe she simply stepped in. But she'd known. She'd seen the signs. She made it look like a rescue, but it was also a shield, built quietly, strategically, with dignity. I sat down again, holding the cousin's letter in one hand and the old photo in the other. The rage that should have come didn't. What settled in my chest was something different. A kind of clarity. A slow, painful understanding that all the restraint I'd been taught wasn't strength. It was survival. I thought back to my first formal gala. I was 18, standing in a silk dress next to Marisol while she introduced me to business partners like I was her protege. I smiled, said all the right things, and remembered feeling like I was floating. By 21, I had my own place, paid for it myself. Still no birthday calls, no check-ins, no "Are you safe?" from Letty. Just silence. People asked, "What's your relationship with your mom like?" I'd smile and say, "I was raised by books and a woman with no hugs but plenty of keys." Even that answer was too generous. I reached for a pen and wrote one sentence at the top of a new page. Tomorrow, she'll find out I've read everything. The morning light pushed through the lace curtains of the east-facing windows, casting shadows across the long oak dining table. The estate smelled like rosemary and coffee, thanks to the brunch caterer I'd booked 2 weeks ago, before I knew she'd show up and turn everything into theater. Guests trickled in wearing cashmere sweaters and polite smiles, the kind of people who speak in controlled tones and bring wine even when no one asked. I'd invited distant relatives out of obligation, and Marisol's legal team out of necessity. I wasn't looking for a show, but Letty never missed a stage. She arrived 15 minutes early, dressed like she was accepting a humanitarian award, tailored navy coat, heels that didn't belong on this gravel driveway, and a brooch I hadn't seen since I was 12. I watched her step out of the car like a woman who didn't fear rejection, because she never assumed she needed permission. She knew how to make an entrance, I thought. And how to hijack one, too. I didn't greet her. I nodded once and walked her toward the garden room where the food was set. She introduced herself loudly to a cousin she hadn't spoken to in 2 decades as Marisol's closest family. No one corrected her. We were barely 30 minutes into the event when she pulled the first trigger. "Let's not make a scene, darling," she said quietly while sipping champagne. "It's unbecoming." That wasn't advice. It was a warning. I knew the setup was coming. I just didn't expect her to bait the crowd so smoothly. When the first toast was raised in Marisol's honor, I stood with my glass and stayed quiet. I wasn't there to perform grief. I lived it. That's when she stepped forward. "I hope you don't mind," she said sweetly to the host, "but I'd like to say a few words about my dear sister." She spoke for 3 minutes, just enough to seem sincere, but not enough for anyone to question her narrative. Then she turned to me, all eyes shifting in my direction. "Shalia," she said with a saccharine smile, "would you like to say something too? After all, she raised you." I gave a small shake of my head. "Nothing?" She pressed louder. "Don't you think your aunt deserved a better goodbye from you?" The air snapped. Glasses stopped mid-clink. Forks paused above plates. She'd just cast me as the ungrateful heir, not openly, but with enough implication to seed doubt in the room. People glanced sideways, unsure what was going on, but certain they'd stepped into something private. She weaponized grief, I thought. She turned my silence into suspicion. I forced a small smile and lifted my glass. Marisol knew exactly what I would have said, I said evenly. We didn't need an audience. That was enough. A few people nodded. Some looked away. Letty looked like she'd swallowed vinegar. After the brunch ended, I lingered in the main hall to thank the legal team and walk out a few stragglers. As I was returning to the parlor, a woman in her 40s approached me with a business card in hand. Kara Emmons, she said. Legacy Reclaimed Podcast. I cover family estate battles, inheritance disputes, you name it. I didn't take the card. She smiled anyway. You're already on my radar, Shalia. And your mother's narrative? It's traveling. I folded my arms. That was quick, Kara shrugged. She contacted half the regional press already. Has her story down to a science? Abandoned mother, grieving sister, cut out of everything. You're painted as the cold heiress. It'll be on radio by Monday. Then why are you here? I asked. Because I want your version, and because if you stay silent, hers wins by default. I exhaled slowly. I'm not trying to fight with my mother in public, I said. I'm trying to finish what my aunt started. Kara's eyes were steady. Sometimes the truth has to be louder than the lie to be believed. She left the card anyway. I didn't pick it up. That night, I sat at Marisol's desk with my phone, legs curled under me like I used to when I studied for college finals. The room smelled faintly of the lavender sachets she kept in every drawer. I opened the voice recorder app and hit record. My name is Shalia, and this is not revenge, this is survival, with receipts. I began to speak, slowly, deliberately. Everything Letty had said at the brunch, every shift in tone, every sideways glance. I recounted the guardianship paper, the offer of 20%, the weaponized toast, and my refusal to be baited. I'm not sharing this yet, I said aloud. Not because I'm afraid, but because leverage is more valuable than sympathy. I documented everything. Time, date, names. When I finished, I saved the file, titled it simply, Not a Confession. Then I attached it to an encrypted email and sent it to myself under a pseudonym account I'd set up 2 years ago during a different legal scare. Before I closed the laptop, I added one line to the voice memo's description. This isn't a confession. It's a contingency. They hung her photo over the entrance, Marisol, in black and white, her smile just shy of a smirk, as if she knew even in death she'd be borrowed for performances she never agreed to. I stood outside the Asheville Community Center for a moment, watching people file into the gala like it was any other well-meaning charity event. Wine glasses were already clinking, and the string quartet played something too cheerful for the occasion. Inside, the room had been transformed with banners draped in deep navy and gold. In loving vision, a tribute to Marisol E. Red one. Another boasted, a legacy of leadership celebrating family roots. Nowhere, on the walls, the programs, or the guest list, was my name. I kept walking. At the far end of the hall, Letty was surrounded by a semicircle of donors and local business leaders, her hand resting on one man's forearm, laughing lightly at something. She looked like a matriarch. She dressed like one. And she carried herself like she belonged in that exact role. She's calling herself Marisol's partner in vision, a woman whispered near the drink table. I kept my head down. I picked up one of the programs, flipped through it casually. Speeches listed. Donors acknowledged. Letty's name, front and center, introduced as Philanthropic Director of the Estate Legacy Committee. No mention of me. I flipped to the Honoring Our Founders page and spotted the family tree graphic. It stopped at Marisol. I, her legal heir, the woman she raised, was a blank space. I looked up just in time to see the slideshow begin. Photo after photo of Marisol through the decades. Her first real estate deal. Her standing outside her law office. Her on a yacht with a group of colleagues, none of whom I recognized. And then a photo I did remember. Except I wasn't in it. I had been cropped out. Grief has a funny way of rewriting history, I thought. So does greed. The applause at the end of Letty's speech was polite. Some stood. I didn't. I'd barely made it halfway to the exit when a woman in a maroon blazer stopped me. "Excuse me," she said, smiling kindly. "Are you with the media team?" I blinked. "Why?" "You've been so quiet, taking notes? Or maybe helping with the program?" I gave a tight smile and nodded once. It was easier. "You learn to swallow rage when the venue isn't yours," I told myself. Instead of leaving, I turned back, walked past the buffet, past the coat room, and slipped into the event coordination office near the back hallway. No one stopped me. I opened the drawer labeled Event Assets and found the original printed guest list. There it was, my name. Shalia Evans, Host Committee. Scratched out in red pen. I took a photo and slipped the page back in place. I wanted to storm back into the hall, grab the mic, and ask the crowd if they knew what kind of mother Letty had really been. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Not because I was scared, but because I had something better than volume. I had receipts. Outside, dusk settled in, the air cooled, and the temperature drop felt good on my face. I headed toward the parking lot when I heard someone call, "Miss Evans?" A man, mid-50s maybe, wearing a soft blazer and worn leather shoes. His expression was unsure, like someone stepping into a story they weren't sure they belonged in. "I'm Eli," he said. "I dated Letty years ago, after her husband left." I didn't respond, just waited. "She used to talk about you, about how things would be easier if you weren't around." His voice cracked, not from emotion, more like shame. "She said, 'That girl doesn't bend. She'll break everything around her first.'" My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. But something inside me moved. Not because I was shocked, but because it confirmed what I'd always suspected, that Letty hadn't just walked away from me. She'd planned for it. "She scared me," Eli admitted. Not in a dramatic way, just that cold calm, that sense that she could cut people out without blinking. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because I didn't speak up then, and I should have." He handed me a card. "If you ever need to confirm what I said, on record, I'm here." I didn't thank him. I nodded. That was enough. Back at home, I placed the program with the red line through my name next to Eli's card on the dining table. I stared at both. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I thought. It was a campaign. I opened my phone, clicked the voice recorder again, and hit record. Tonight is October 5th. I'm logging the erasure, again. My name removed from an event held in my aunt's name, proof attached. I listed the details, the slide deck photos that cropped me out, the donor's mistake, the original program. Then I added Eli's testimony, summarized our conversation, captured the context. "Some people don't haunt places," I said quietly. "They haunt perceptions." I saved the file and uploaded it to the encrypted archive I'd started last week. Another brick in the foundation I was building. Not for revenge, for record. Before closing my laptop, I opened an email draft from Letty's assistant, the one she'd sent 2 days ago with a press release. It had my name listed under Event Volunteers. Not even Host Committee. I clicked Delete. "You've erased me once," I said aloud. "You won't do it again." The letter arrived tucked between a stack of estate paperwork, not in an envelope with a return address, not even in a medical folder, just a plain white sheet, marked Confidential, in bold across the top. No preamble, just a subject line, Urgent Psychological Evaluation Request, follow-up needed. I reread it twice. Following concerning behavioral reports submitted by an immediate family member, we advise Ms. Shalia Evans to appear at our Asheville facility for a clinical reassessment of mental wellness. It was signed by a name I didn't recognize and a title that made my skin prickle. Nothing ruins your morning like being told you might be losing your mind by someone who left you to raise yourself. I set the letter down and stared at it, fingers stiff around my coffee mug. The paper wasn't warm, but it burned. The clinic name wasn't unfamiliar. I'd seen it listed on the sponsorship board at the gala, the one Letty helped organize. She'd even taken a photo under the logo, beaming like she hadn't stolen my story, and spray-painted her version over it. I didn't call. I didn't panic. I simply picked up my phone, hit record, and began speaking softly into the mic. This is Shalia Evans. The date is October 6th. I've just received a letter suggesting I submit to psychological reassessment. The clinic has ties to my estranged mother, who has previously attempted to manipulate legal status in her favor. I intend to investigate, quietly and completely. By late morning, I was walking into the clinic lobby in a navy jacket and pressed slacks, looking every bit the capable professional I'd built myself to be. The receptionist greeted me with a tone that straddled courtesy and suspicion. "I believe you have a file under my name," I said, pulling a polite smile. "It would have been created recently, possibly within the last month. I'm requesting a full copy." Her eyes flicked toward a screen behind the desk. "May I ask the reason for your visit?" "Yes. A guardian requested evaluation. I'd like to know what they submitted and why it wasn't verified with me directly." The woman typed something quickly, then hesitated. "One moment, please." I waited, palms tucked into my coat pockets. My phone was still recording, silent and steady. I could feel the adrenaline kicking in, the pulse at the base of my neck picking up speed. A door opened. A middle-aged man in a blazer that didn't quite match his shoes stepped out. "Ms. Evans," he said, extending a hand. "Dr. Powell. Why don't we step into my office?" He offered me a seat, poured water into a paper cup, and positioned his hands like a lawyer rather than a doctor. "I understand you have concerns about the file." "I do," I said. "I'd like a copy, and the name of whoever submitted the request." He leaned back. "That would be confidential unless—" I cut him off. "Unless I'm the subject of the file." "Which I am." He nodded slowly, then said the name I knew was coming. "Letty Evans, listed as your guardian. She submitted concerns citing erratic behavior, grief instability, and a potential risk to estate management integrity." "Based on what?" I asked calmly. "Anecdotal concerns. No direct incident." I took out a business card and placed it gently on his desk. "My attorney, Corinne Briggs. Any further action toward my medical status will go through her." His posture shifted immediately. The act was over. Within 10 minutes, I walked out with printed documentation proving the file was created using a guardianship form over a decade old, one that had never been legally revalidated. And yet, the file had been enough to open an inquiry. "You know how people joke about being declared incompetent?" I murmured into my phone once I got back in the car. "It stops being funny when your name's on the form." I returned to the estate with the folder under my arm. Corinne was already waiting in the sunroom with something in her lap. "You're not going to like this," she said without standing. "We found another clause." I sat. No questions, just bracing. She opened the folder and placed a scanned document on the table. It was from Marisol's original estate trust, buried deep in the secondary legal amendments. "If you're ever declared legally mentally unfit," Corinne explained, "control of the estate pauses. Not to Letty, thankfully, but it triggers full court review." Marisol had included it as standard precautionary language, probably thinking she was protecting me. She never thought anyone would weaponize it. "She can't have what I inherited," I said, "so she's trying to make me unqualified to hold it." Corinne nodded once. "It's a technical backdoor, and she just tried to open it." I took a deep breath, nodded, and stood. "Then let's lock it." I spent the next 3 hours building a digital archive, scanned records of the false clinic letter, the audio recording from the receptionist, Dr. Powell's signed release, and Corinne's affidavit confirming the original clause and its context. I didn't label the folder "Revenge" or "Evidence." I labeled it "Moves Ahead." I scheduled a hearing, preemptive, quiet. "She thinks she's playing chess," I said out loud, uploading the last PDF. "But she's never met someone who already owns the board." Just as I closed the lid of my laptop, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "I heard you had a little doctor's visit. Hope you're resting." I stared at it for a moment, then whispered what I already knew was true. "Checkmate's coming." The headlines didn't knock. They burst in. I woke up to over 30 notifications, and my phone vibrating like it was trying to escape the nightstand. Text after text, from people I hadn't heard from in years. A screenshot from the Asheville Times led the flood. Forgotten Mother Left in the Cold by Heiress Daughter. Right below the headline, a full-color photo of Letty, seated in front of a framed portrait of Marisol. Her hands clutched a pressed handkerchief, eyes red, mouth tight, a perfect performance. It wasn't journalism. It was manipulation with good lighting. The article read like a sad novel. Estranged for over a decade, Letty Evans has only ever wanted one thing: to reconnect with the daughter she was forced to let go. It painted her as a widow left behind by a ruthless family. No mention of the guardianship. No mention of the check she cashed to leave me. No mention of the paper trail I was building in silence. They quoted her. "I forgave her long ago. I just hope she finds her way back to love." The article ended with an invitation to a fundraiser in her honor. All of it had been a setup. The brunch, the gala, the doctor's letter. It all built up to this moment, the sympathy crescendo. Now I was the cold, calculated heiress who'd thrown away a grieving mother. A new message popped up from an old college roommate. "Hey, is this about you?" I didn't answer. My business account had already been tagged in 24 posts. Some comments were cruel. Some were curious. None asked for my side. By noon, the podcast episode dropped. Family Fortunes, a true crime-style series, released episode 83, The Heiress and the Erased Mother. Dramatic piano music in the background, a male host with a voice built for gravitas narrating over selectively edited clips. They used a voiceover of Letty from the gala. I only ever wanted to be there for her. Social media ran with it. Twitter threads. TikToks with side-by-side photos of me next to headlines. Reddit posts speculating how much I inherited. YouTube videos titled, "Why Rich Kids Cut Off Their Families." Then came the DM that settled something inside me. "You're everything people hate about rich kids. You don't even deserve that name." I closed the app, turned the phone over. Letty didn't just want my money, I thought. She wanted my narrative. She didn't just want access. She wanted authorship. By the time Corinne arrived, I was already halfway through printing every article. She stood silently in the doorway, eyes skimming headlines over my shoulder. "We could issue a cease and desist," she said. "I'm not interested in paper slaps," I replied. Eulalia showed up an hour later, holding her laptop like a weapon. "There's a way to flip this," she said. "You do an interview, controlled, raw, honest. Put it out through my channel." "I'm not doing damage control," I told her. "I'm building record," Corinne nodded. "Then let's do this surgically." We spent the next 4 hours building a timeline chart on my office wall. Everything Letty had done, from the guardianship attempt to the false clinic letter, each headline, each post, annotated with dates, screenshots, and paper copies. We cataloged every lie, every manipulation. "I'm not going to fight a lie with noise," I said. "I'll fight it with receipts, records, and restraint." That night, I sat at my desk alone, staring at the glowing red dot of my voice recorder. I began, "This is Shalia Evans. October 8th. I've been publicly accused of abandoning my mother. The truth is, she left me when I was 17. What she wants now isn't reconciliation, it's redirection. Of wealth, of sympathy, of power." I spoke for 30 minutes, calmly, clearly, no script. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for understanding. I narrated the facts. "This isn't personal," I said. "It's strategic reputation theft." I clicked save and uploaded the file to my encrypted folder. The next morning, Corinne brought more news. The judge had agreed to a preliminary hearing based not on defamation, but on the attempt to destabilize an inheritance through psychological manipulation and public coercion. "This isn't about emotion," she said. "It's about protecting what's legally yours." I nodded. By noon, the podcast's Instagram account had posted a teaser asking followers, "Should we bring Shalia on for her side?" I scrolled past it, then paused. The message request icon blinked once. New email. Subject line, "Care to tell your side?" We pulled into the courthouse parking lot just as the sun broke over the ridgeline. The sky was clear, almost unnervingly calm for a day that would stir everything I had buried. I adjusted the collar of my black blazer and stepped out, heels clicking with more certainty than I actually felt. Corinne was already waiting, standing by the front steps with a folder hugged tight to her chest. You ready? She asked without pleasantries. This isn't revenge, I said. It's restoration. Corinne didn't smile. She nodded. That was enough. We walked inside, past the early morning security guard, through halls that echoed a little too loud, into the anteroom just outside courtroom B. We sat on the bench, opening the evidence packet one last time. Eli's sworn statement, the fraudulent psychiatric referral, the original guest list with my name crossed out in red ink, and our ace, the receipt. Corinne tapped the edge of the folder. We're not here to fight fire with fire. We're here to show the smoke leads back to her. When they opened the doors and called us in, the room wasn't packed, but there were enough people to make it real. 2 journalists, 1 podcaster, a clerk, and Letty herself sitting at the front, dressed like a widow in mourning. I didn't acknowledge her. She didn't deserve it. The judge entered, a woman with tired eyes and a low voice. We stood. We sat. And then Corinne stood again. Your Honor, she began, we're here today not for a trial of emotion, but a matter of truth. What we submit today are not accusations, but records, not opinions, but evidence. She handed the clerk a document that had lived in a folder in my safe for months, one I had tried not to read too many times. The court screen displayed a scan of it for everyone to see, a signed payment receipt from Letty Evans, dated 15 years ago. A clear acknowledgement of her voluntary relinquishment of all parental rights in exchange for a monetary sum paid by Marisol. The silence that followed was not dramatic, it was heavy. This is a legal agreement, Corinne said. Notarized, witnessed, stored in a secured location until now. Letty shifted in her seat. She tried to object, but the judge lifted a hand. Then she spoke. That document was a mistake. I didn't understand what I was signing. I was coerced. I was grieving. Corinne remained composed. Then let's listen to your words from that time. She pressed play on a small recorder. Eli's voice came through clear and slow. She said, if that girl's out of the way, I can breathe again. I'll sign whatever makes that happen. Letty's face turned the color of dried ash. The judge didn't speak immediately. She leaned forward, brows knit, scanning the page again, as if it might change. It didn't. When asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood slowly, palms flat against the wooden table. I was 17 when she last called me her daughter, I said. 17 when she traded me for silence. Now she wants to stand in a courtroom and pretend I was the one who disappeared. I didn't cry. My voice didn't tremble. I didn't win the lottery. I survived it. I looked toward Letty. She didn't want custody. She wanted credit, and now she wants control. I turned back to the bench. Everything I've done in my life has been without her, but she's tried again and again to re-enter it on her terms for her benefit. I ended with, truth doesn't panic. It just waits for the right room to speak. The judge folded her hands. This is not a trial, she said, but I am empowered to make a recommendation based on the presented material. She paused. I will be issuing a protective injunction, Ms. Aisha. Letty Evans is not to interfere with the execution of the estate, nor represent herself as a legal stakeholder of any kind. Corinne exhaled. I nodded once and sat. Outside, the courthouse steps felt steep, but my spine held steady. Reporters buzzed around us before we could reach the sidewalk. Cameras rolled. Microphones were shoved forward. Corinne raised her hand. Miss Evans will not be intimidated by false narratives. The court has acknowledged the pattern of manipulation presented, and we are moving forward. One reporter leaned in, voice raised. Shalia, do you feel vindicated? I turned toward him, my voice quiet but sure. I feel seen. That night, the adrenaline wore off in layers. I made dinner but didn't eat it. Walked the perimeter of the garden, but didn't admire the flowers. My mind was somewhere else, still in that room, hearing her voice say, that was a mistake. Near midnight, my inbox chimed. No subject line, no name. Just a single sentence, she's not done yet. The house felt different when I returned. Not better, not worse, just shifted, like it was watching me instead of waiting. The hallway echoed my steps more than usual, or maybe I was just more aware of it now. Silence isn't always peaceful. It can feel like a presence. And this one whispered old names I wasn't ready to hear. I passed the study, then the den, until I reached the west wing, the part of the house Marisol used least in her final year. At the end of that hallway was a built-in cabinet I'd never opened, with brass handles dulled from time and dust. Corinne had mentioned it once, after the hearing. There might be things you'll want in the private files. Marisol was meticulous. The drawer creaked as I pulled it open. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a small leather-bound journal. It was old but clean. The initials on the front were faint, but I knew them instantly. M.E. I sat down on the hardwood floor and opened it. The first page began with a date, 6 weeks after I'd come to live with her. She was left on a Tuesday. I found her with cereal and fear in her eyes. It took months before she asked me a single question that wasn't about survival. I didn't blink. Marisol had documented everything. My habits, my silence, my questions. But more than that, she wrote about Letty, about the tension, the legal worries, the way she always felt Letty might come back. Not for me, but for something else. I see it clearly now. Letty isn't afraid of losing Shalia. She's afraid of Shalia becoming more than her. Each page cut deeper than the last. I won't shame the girl with stories of what her mother did before. I'll just teach her how to hold ground when someone tries to take what's already hers. And this. She thinks silence is survival. I want her to learn that voice is power. By the time I reached the final entry, the tears were dry before they reached my cheek. The estate hadn't just been a gift. It was a blueprint, a defense strategy passed on from one woman to another. That afternoon, I needed air, space, something outside the walls. I drove into town and met Nadia at the cafe off Lexington, an old classmate I hadn't spoken to since we graduated. She greeted me with nervous energy. We ordered drinks and sat near the window. "Your name's been everywhere," she said, avoiding direct eye contact. "I almost didn't reach out. Didn't know if you'd want to talk to anyone from back then." I smiled thinly. "I appreciate that you did." She tapped her nails on her cup. "I always wondered why we stopped hanging out junior year. I thought maybe I did something." "You didn't," I said. "But I'm guessing you were told I did." She nodded. "My parents said they heard from your mom that you were unstable, that you had episodes. They didn't want me around drama. I was 15. I didn't question it." I froze. All these years, I thought I'd simply slipped away from people's lives. I didn't know my name had been repainted behind my back. Nadia continued, more softly now. "I saw the podcast stuff and your court case, and I realized you weren't the one who left. You were pushed." I inhaled slowly, looked her in the eye. "Would you be willing to say that on record? Just for my files?" She didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." We talked for another hour, about high school, about the things we lost because adults couldn't tell the truth. She hugged me when we parted. I didn't cry, but I felt something loosen in my chest I hadn't noticed was tight. Back at the estate, I uploaded the audio to my archive. I labeled it Nadia Statement, Character Slander Recovery. Then I scanned Marisol's journal, each page preserved, especially the entries tied to Letty's tactics, fear, silence, isolation. I wasn't paranoid, I said aloud. I was being prepared. I opened my digital timeline again, pinning events with new precision, legal threats, media interviews, high school rumors, a thread that started years earlier than I thought, all leading to today. It wasn't just about money, it never was. It was about ownership, of story, of perception, of voice. I paused at one entry in the journal. The house won't protect her, but maybe it'll remind her who tried. I looked around at the bookshelves, the paintings, the stillness that now felt less haunting and more loyal. Truth never needed to be proven, I whispered. It just needed to be preserved long enough to be undeniable. I closed the journal, backed up the archive to 2 separate drives, and uploaded a third to a private cloud with legal encryption. Then I sat back in the leather chair where Marisol once signed contracts. I opened my inbox and hit send on the final upload. Just before turning off the lamp for the night, I said aloud, firm, steady, "Let her try one more time, just once more." 3 days had passed since the courthouse echoed with truth. The headlines had quieted slightly, but Letty's last performance was just beginning. Her face reappeared on local event flyers, this time framed with angelic lighting and bold letters, "Grieving sister, forgotten mother to honor lost family." I found the ad scrolling Facebook over coffee. A public memorial, Central Park, hosted by Letty. I didn't flinch. I didn't call Corinne. I simply clicked Watch Live. The live stream began with soft music, piano, maybe pre-recorded. A canopy had been set up over the city's historic stone fountain. Under it, a podium. Beside it, a blown-up photo of me at 6 years old. School picture day, missing tooth and all, held in a gilded frame I hadn't seen since childhood. Letty stepped up to the mic, wearing a full-length black dress and oversized sunglasses that did nothing to hide her practiced tear swipes. She waited for the murmurs to die down, then took a shaky breath. "I know many of you never knew my sister," she began, "but Marisol was the compass of our family. She kept us whole. She took in my daughter when I couldn't. And for that, I thank her every day." She paused, just long enough. "I've forgiven my daughter, long before she thought she needed it. I pray for her every morning. I just hope, wherever she is, she knows I still love her." The crowd sniffled. The live stream chat flooded with heart emojis and "Stay strong, Letty" comments. Her stage was grief. Her costume was mother. Her script was a lie. As the audience clapped, she pressed her hand to the photo of me, nodding with trembling lips. Media outlets reposted the clip within the hour. "A moment of healing," one headline read. "Mother offers public forgiveness, seeks reunion." Back at the estate, I paced the study, fingers clenched so tightly around my phone the plastic case creaked. Corinne arrived within minutes, Eulalia a few breaths behind. Corinne tossed her bag on the table, opened her laptop. "She monetized it," she said. "The memorial event was registered under her LLC. Ticketed sponsors. Tax deductible." "She used my face," I said, voice flat. "That picture was from my old pediatrician files. She must have dug it out of Marisol's storage." Eulalia pulled up a press kit. She emailed this to every outlet from Asheville to Charleston, pitched herself as a forgiving mother seeking reconciliation. I opened my laptop. I didn't speak. I uploaded the audio file, Eli's confession, then the receipt, then the fake diagnosis, then the scratched-out guest list, the judge's injunction, the transcript from the last hearing. "You want to run it through our legal team?" Eulalia asked. "No," I said. "No filters, no edits. Let the public see it raw." That night, I sat down under Marisol's old reading lamp, hit record, and titled the video, "The Truth My Mother Won't Tell You." My voice was steady. "I'm not here to ask for sympathy. I'm here because silence almost cost me everything. My mother wants to be seen as a victim. She never wanted to be one, only to wear it when the lights came on." I detailed the records, one by one, showed dates, names, screenshots. She erased me from galas, from documents, from conversations with my teachers, my friends, my identity. I ended with this: "If you've ever been erased by your own blood, you're not alone. And if no one believes your side, keep the receipts." I clicked upload. Within the first hour, the views climbed into the thousands. By morning, the hashtag #ICUShalia was trending across the Southeast. Corinne called. Local news is already backtracking. 2 outlets removed Letty's interview. Eulalia emailed. Publicist resigned. Her donations are dropping. Her speaker slot at the Wellness Summit? Pulled. A leaked message from a local radio host hit Twitter. We were all duped. She should be ashamed. I didn't dance. I didn't smile. I simply sat in my office, letting the tide turn. Truth isn't loud. It just has better timing. That night, I set my phone to silent, finally ready for one evening without alerts. But then the screen lit up. New message. No contact name. You're not the only one, she erased. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy with embossing, and unsigned. It arrived folded inside a second piece of stationery, handwritten in a familiar, calculated script. One last conversation, woman to woman. I should have ignored it. I didn't. Instead, I set the rules. 1 meeting, 1 hour, no cameras, no second chances. I picked the front parlor, the same room she had re-entered my life in, because I needed to control the frame this time. I needed the same windows, the same silence, but none of the emotional weight. Closure isn't always for the one who was hurt. Sometimes it's the last act of the one who did the hurting. And sometimes it's both. I straightened the chairs, dimmed the lamps, and laid out a single glass of water. No tea, no formality. The house was still. The light was soft. And when I opened the door, she was already walking up the steps. Letty looked older, but not vulnerable. She wore a long gray cardigan, flats, no jewelry. Her makeup was minimal. Her posture was a careful performance of humility. "Thank you for agreeing," she said as I stepped aside. I didn't answer. I just gestured toward the parlor. She sat slowly, folding her hands in her lap. I stayed standing. "I've made a lot of mistakes," she began. "I was broken back then, angry. I didn't know how to mother anyone, especially you." I stayed silent. "I didn't come today to fight. I came to say I'm sorry. Genuinely." She reached into her purse, not slowly, not dramatically, and pulled out a small bag tied with a satin ribbon. A letter sat on top. "I hope someday you'll forgive me," she said, placing it on the table. "This is all I have left to give." Her regrets were prepackaged, her timing aligned perfectly with the shift in public opinion. She was no longer winning. Now she needed mercy. I nodded once and showed her out. No tears, no hug, just the click of the door latching behind her. I sat down in the chair she'd just vacated, letting the room breathe again. Then I opened the envelope. Blank. No apology, no explanation, just pristine, unused paper. I stared at it. Then I laughed, a short, bitter exhale. 15 years ago, she left me a note that said nothing real. 15 years later, she did it again. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and fed the envelope into the flame. It curled quickly, turning to ash in seconds. It wasn't closure, it was confirmation. Later that night, I took out my journal, one I'd kept separate from the archive, and wrote my final entry about her. She was my beginning, but not my becoming. I acknowledged the silence, the damage, the manipulation, and the strength that bloomed anyway. Then I closed the book and slid it next to Marisol's. No grand speech, just the sound of the drawer clicking shut. I stood at the window, letting the air of autumn drift in. The house didn't feel haunted anymore, just lived in. Just real. When my phone buzzed, I picked it up without thinking. A message from the courthouse. "Final judgment has been filed. You are sole inheritor." The courthouse was quiet that morning, far quieter than the day of our hearing. No cameras, no journalists, just finality. Corinne and I walked in side by side, our steps echoing lightly through the marble foyer. There was no need for speeches this time. The clerk handed me a sealed envelope, thick with official weight. Inside, a single folded card. The handwriting was fluid, deliberate. "I had a mother like yours. I stayed silent too long. You didn't. You didn't let her erase you. Never forget, you rewrote the ending. Judge E. Townsend." I closed the note, holding it in both hands for a long second before slipping it into my bag. Vindication doesn't need volume. It just needs to be final. Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters waited. Corinne raised an eyebrow at me. My call. I stepped forward. "Thank you all for being here," I said, voice even, not rehearsed. "Today marks the legal close of a long, painful chapter. I want to thank the court for listening, my legal team for standing with me, and my late Aunt Marisol for never looking away when the rest of the world did." A reporter stepped closer. "Shalia, was this about money?" "No," I said. "It was about history and who gets to write it." Another asked, "Do you forgive her, your mother?" I paused. I forgave her the moment I stopped needing her approval. That's freedom. That answer echoed louder than any denial ever could. By the time we returned to the estate, the leaves had begun to shift, early reds and burnt oranges creeping into the trees. I walked straight through the house, out to the backyard, where a small fire pit waited at the edge of the stone garden path. Corinne followed silently, carrying a folder marked Final Disposition. I carried nothing but an envelope and an old clipboard with Marisol's last estate checklist. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the documents into the fire, one by one. Letty's cease and desist threats, the guardianship form, the old press release that listed me as a volunteer. Then, lastly, the envelope from our last meeting, still blank, still weightless. The flames caught quickly, curling paper into memory. I stood there, hands clasped before me, watching the smoke twist skyward like a spirit finally set loose. Inheritance isn't just land, I whispered. It's what we choose not to pass on. Corinne nodded once. No need for words. Eulalia, camera in hand, stood a respectful distance away. She clicked it off mid-record. This moment doesn't need to go viral, I said. Keep it for me. Later that week, I sat at the estate's desk, now fully mine, and finalized paperwork for a foundation, the Marisol Initiative, a nonprofit supporting young women who had been abandoned, silenced, or erased by the people meant to protect them. The scholarship I launched was called The Second Voice. Mail began to arrive, letters from donors, legal confirmations, but one envelope stood out. The return address read, Newark, New Jersey. Inside was a folded sheet, written in purple ink. Dear Ms. Evans, I'm 16. My mom says I'm dramatic. My teachers say I'm too much. But I saw your video, and I wanted you to know, you made me believe I'm not broken. I read the letter twice, then folded it gently and placed it in the drawer with Marisol's journal. No fanfare, just gratitude. I stared out the window, the afternoon sun painting gold across the estate floorboards. The same house that once held secrets now held a future, and not just mine. I opened a fresh document on my laptop. Title, The Fire Doesn't Destroy the Past. Subtitle, It Clears the Path. And I began to write.